2.
And welcome everyone to Singularity University's Exponential Medicine. I am your host, Kevin Edwards. Alongside me today, we have Daniel Beeler, the CTO of SyncThink. Daniel, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
SyncThink. Am I synchronizing my thoughts with you right now? Is that what's going on?
That's right. We're synchronizing all of the input through our sensory system with our behaviors, and we're doing that through prediction.
Predictions. Okay, so we got some equipment on us. We're not going to tease our audience any longer. Let's walk through an example of how this equipment works.
So this is our platform. It's called iSync. This is an eye tracking analytics platform. So what I have in my head is an eye tracking device. So we've embedded in a VR platform infrared eye tracking sensors, and that tracks where my eye position relative to what's displayed on the VR content.
Okay.
That has a Bluetooth connection to an administrative tablet, and you're going to be administering an assessment on me, and I'm going to explain what's going to happen during that assessment.
Okay, well, let's get to it. Put on the goggles, Daniel. Let's do the smooth pursuit.
Yep. So here, we're testing 4 modalities of orientation. So either I'm moving or the world is moving, and I'm synchronizing my eye movement to the visual stimuli. And that allows me to synchronize my behavior to interact in real time with the outside world. So the smooth pursuit assessment is an ocular motor assessment. So I'm static, the world is in motion, and I'm synchronizing my eye movement with a circular moving target. And the goal here is not to stress or confuse the user, it's to be as predictable as possible, and then use that eye tracking information to characterize how well I synchronize with that predictable stimulus. The whole assessment's about 60 seconds. We don't need a whole lot of time with your eyes because we're taking data at a very high rate. And this is the same exact paradigm that we've been studying for about 15 years now. So the inventor of this technique is Dr. Jam Gajar. He's a professor of neurosurgery at Stanford. And around the mid-2000s, he was looking at a way to measure acute disorientation quickly and objectively. So he started looking at tapping mechanisms. How well could you tap to a known beat? But the problem there is that the throughput's really low. It takes a lot of data to figure out how well you're synchronizing with a beat. But eye movement and eye tracking in general is a really quick way to access that window to the brain to understand how I'm processing information and synchronizing with the outside world. So we just took a live assessment right here, and we do an automated analysis that characterizes just that. So this is my eye motion relative to the center of the display, and then my eye motion relative to that target that I was following. So I was seeing a smoother version of what you were seeing on the preview here. And we're taking data as I'm doing that and then characterizing how well I synchronize my eye movement both in the direction of motion, so you can think of that as my timing performance, and then perpendicular to that, that's my spatial performance. So we label that here. We do an assessment of quality, so that's the information that we gathered at the beginning of the assessment, and we provide that to the clinician for evaluation. So they can do this as part of their typical brain health evaluation, targeting disease states from concussion to balance and vestibular disorders, things like vertigo, to ADHD, to chronic conditions like Alzheimer's dementia.
Let's take an example, for instance, like concussions that you just mentioned. Maybe what's a clinician looking through in terms of the breakthrough from an assessment like this?
Right. So what a clinician is looking is for that visual synchronization. So that tells me, am I oriented to the outside world? Am I oriented to that moving target? And we break that down into those individual modalities, right? So I might have one where, I can't synchronize if the world is in motion, or I can't synchronize if I'm in motion, right? And we can isolate that impairment and then produce targeted, individualized therapies to improve that visual orientation paradigm, right? So it's a functional measurement with functional therapies associated with them, and those can be delivered directly on the device.
So this concussion example, you'd be able to pinpoint down exactly where you are in that relative connection to the outside world and its perception. I'm sure it's different for a lot of different people taking this test, but if I got a result if I had a concussion and I guess my results were different from another person that had the same concussion, you'd be able to give me a different therapy based off of this result. Is that kind of?
Yeah, it's targeting that specific type of impairment. And there are different signatures for different types of impairment. We've produced these labels associated with different brain states, right? Things like ADHD, things like concussion, but they're non-specific, right? And they take an expert to evaluate effectively. So applying these functional measurements to these non-specific labels improves the outcomes by providing targeted therapies.
Daniel, how did the idea for SyncThink form, and where is it going now?
Sure, yeah. So as I mentioned, we have a core foundational knowledge that's backed by science. We've worked for over a decade with our partners at Stanford University, the Brain Trauma Foundation, and the military to publish over 30 peer-reviewed publications that went into this technology development. Wow. We have the foundational IP in this area, but most importantly, we're trying to make this technology as accessible as possible. So these eye tracking sensors are what you're going to find on next generation AR and VR devices. Specifically, most importantly, the AR devices first. By early next year, you're going to see at least 2 platforms with eye tracking as a native sensor in those devices that can perform analysis that we just did.
So a big conversation here has been, can we bring together these silos? So maybe with this AR example that you said, it's going to be just natively installed into every single AR pair of glasses or goggles. You were then able to collect a ton of data from just everyday people and maybe track and understand some differences between their eye movements. And
that's right. It completely opens
things.
how we apply this technology and how we change that standard of care, right? With sensors that are accessible like that, we can use this technology to screen people who are not near population centers, who don't have access to this high level of standard of care that we have in, say, Stanford. You can send this technology out instead of, doing neurophysical therapy in a 10-week program. You can use this technology to manage that impairment throughout the rest of your life, right? You can screen people to see if they should come in for further evaluation, or in this instance of acute injury on the sidelines of a football game, right? Not everyone has that same resources that they do in Division I football, but if you have that sensor and that distributed knowledge, then you can provide a similar level of care with a platform like this.
So technology like VR headsets are now coming to the surface. They've been around for a long time, actually, but now they're being commercialized. Are there any other outstanding technologies that need to adapt in order for this to be fully at scale?
Well, so AR platforms will be the first to deliver the sensor in a sophisticated way, and that's because they need it the most, right? They need it for understanding depth when they're projecting objects onto your physical world. VR devices will do it for neat tricks like optimizing video and making environments more immersive. So if you have eye movements, you can interact with things in that virtual space. But eye tracking sensors are even making its way onto our cell phones, right? So Face ID is a very similar technology to what we just did with this assessment here. And as that grows and becomes more sophisticated, this is something that's going to be in the pockets of every individual.
So with this rapid growing technology, obviously Moore's Law, you're going to, double the innovation or whatever it is and half the cost. The technology is going to grow double and it's going to half the cost, something like that. Don't quote me on that, people.
Sure.
But with this happening, are you more hopeful that all these technologies, all these predictions will come to fruition? Or do you have a little tendency to go, I don't know if all these are actually going to happen?
No, I am firmly believe that everything that we have bet on so far is coming to pass, right? So back in 2014, we saw the rise in VR as the perfect way to commercialize a technology that had only been in the laboratory, only in the military setting, in a cost-effective way, and bring that to any individual with access to this technology. And that's what we've seen. These sensors are becoming much, much more available, much, much more sophisticated, and that's being driven in the consumer space, but having enormous implications on the medical space.
Is there anything that you've learned that maybe has spun off from all of this research? A lot of people who are trying to achieve a moonshot approach might find a lot of unique innovations along the way. I guess the question then would be, this technology that you have right there in front of us, Did you know what it was going to look like before you made it? And did you learn or find any new technology along the way?
Well, that's the advantage of having a product on the market today, is we're able to tailor this over time to meet the needs of clients today while keeping that vision for what it should be in the future, right?
Okay.
And we've developed a data management platform that's cloud connected. One of the biggest problems with medical technology today is just data management. Enabling clinicians to provide data to all stakeholders, to do it in an efficient way, an effective way, and that's what we're doing on this device. And then we continue to iterate on it so that we're making use of the latest eye tracking technologies, the latest visualization platforms, and we're continuing to grow the sophistication of that sensor.
Daniel, you seem to be a forward-looking thinker in this space. Obviously, you're taking on a big challenge, and you're improving along the way every single step through these iterations. It takes a lot of leadership, Daniel. What would you say your definition of a real leader is?
Well, I think it's not just having the vision of what should be, right? It's working with what we have today to put it on a pathway where we can get to there, right? It's that enormous chasm in the middle that all these technologies start to venture over and just drop through. So it's not just seeing the long-term vision; it's seeing the medium-term and short-term vision to get there as well.
Well, Daniel, well said. Thanks for coming on the show today. Learned a lot. Was able to go through an example today about how SyncThink works. For people listening to this, for Daniel Beeler, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you all to go out there and not just think long-term, think middle and short as well to get there. And always, folks, keep it real. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.